The wind howled through the cracked pavement of 7th Street, carrying with it the sharp bite of a Chicago winter. Marcus Reed pulled his coat tighter, his breath fogging in the air as he trudged home from the diner where he'd worked the late shift. At 38, Marcus was a man of routine. Clock in, sling hash browns, clock out, and retreat to the quiet of his small, inherited bungalow. But tonight, something stopped him cold. Huddled against the brick wall of a shuttered pharmacy was a woman, her thin frame trembling under a threadbare blanket. Beside her, a little girl, no older than 5, clutched a stuffed rabbit, her wide eyes scanning the empty street. Marcus's heart lurched. He'd seen homelessness before. Chicago's streets were no stranger to it, but this was different. This was a mother and child, alone with nowhere to go. He hesitated, then kept walking, the image burning into his mind. Marcus had always been a practical man. Growing up in Englewood, he'd learned early to keep his head down and his wallet close. His mother, a nurse who'd raised him alone, had drilled into him the value of self-reliance. "You can't save everyone, Marcus," she'd say, her voice firm but kind. "Take care of your own first." And he had. He'd worked hard, saved enough to keep the bungalow his mother left him, and built a life that, while modest, was his own. But as he unlocked his front door that night, the key felt heavier than usual. He couldn't shake the image of the woman and her daughter. He thought of his mother, who'd sacrificed everything for him. What would she have done? He didn't sleep that night. By morning, Marcus had made up his mind. He brewed a pot of coffee, poured it into a thermos, and grabbed a spare blanket from the closet. The streets were still dark when he returned to 7th Street, half expecting the woman and her daughter to be gone, but there they were, curled together under the same tattered blanket. The woman looked up as he approached, her eyes wary but exhausted. "I'm not here to bother you," Marcus said, holding out the thermos and blanket. "Just thought you could use these." Her name was Lena, she told him, and the girl was her daughter, Sophie. They'd been on the streets for 3 weeks after Lena lost her job in their apartment. Shelters were full, and Lena's pride had kept her from begging. Marcus listened, his chest tightening. He wanted to do more, but what? He wasn't rich. He wasn't a hero. He was just a guy with a diner job and a house that felt too big for one person. Days passed, and Marcus found himself checking on Lena and Sophie daily. He brought sandwiches from the diner, hot chocolate for Sophie, and once, a pair of gloves for Lena's chapped hands. Each time he saw the gratitude in her eyes, but also the shame. Lena was proud, he realized, and every handout chipped away at her dignity. One night, as snow blanketed the city, Marcus couldn't take it anymore. He found them shivering outside, a closed library, Sophie's small body pressed against her mother's. "This isn't right," Marcus said, his voice rough with emotion. "You can't stay out here." Lena shook her head, insisting they'd manage, but Marcus wasn't listening. He reached into his pocket, pulled out his house key, and pressed it into her hand. "Take it," he said. "It's not much, but it's warm. It's safe." Lena stared at the key, her eyes wide with disbelief. "Why would you do this?" she whispered. Marcus didn't have an answer. Not really. All he knew was that he couldn't walk away again. "Because you're a mom," he said finally, "and that little girl deserves better." Lena's tears fell silently, and for a moment the world seemed to pause. Marcus helped them gather their few belongings and led them to his bungalow. It was small, 2 bedrooms, a worn couch, a kitchen that smelled faintly of coffee. But, to Sophie, it was a palace. She ran to the living room, spinning in circles, her laughter filling the space. Lena stood in the doorway, clutching the key like it was a lifeline, and Marcus saw something shift in her, a spark of hope, fragile but real. The next few weeks were a whirlwind. Marcus moved into the diner's back room, telling himself it was temporary. He'd always valued his privacy, his space, but seeing Lena and Sophie settle into the bungalow changed something in him. Lena found a part-time job at a grocery store, and Sophie started school, her stuffed rabbit tucked into her backpack. Marcus stopped by often, bringing groceries or fixing a leaky faucet, but he kept his distance, not wanting to intrude. Still, he couldn't ignore the warmth he felt watching Sophie color at the kitchen table or hearing Lena hum while she cooked. It was a life he hadn't known he'd been missing, but not everyone understood. At the diner, his co-workers whispered, "You gave your house to a stranger," one asked, incredulous. "What if she robs you blind?" Marcus shrugged it off, but doubt crept in. He'd acted on instinct, but what if he'd been reckless? One night he found a letter slipped under the diner's back door. It was from Lena, written in careful looping script. She thanked him, not just for the house, but for giving her back her dignity. "You didn't just give us a key," she wrote. "You gave us a chance to start over." Enclosed was a small drawing from Sophie, a stick figure family with Marcus standing beside them smiling. Marcus read the letter 3 times, his throat tight. Any lingering doubts vanished. The turning point came in spring. Lena had saved enough for a deposit on a small apartment, and she insisted on giving Marcus his key back. They stood in the bungalow's living room, Sophie tugging at Marcus's hand, begging him to visit. Lena's eyes were bright with determination, but also something softer. Gratitude, yes, but also respect. "You changed our lives," she said. Marcus shook his head, embarrassed. "You changed mine," he admitted. He'd always thought kindness was a luxury, something you gave when you had extra. But Lena and Sophie had shown him it was something else. A strength, a choice, a way to make the world a little less cold. As Lena and Sophie moved into their new apartment, Marcus returned to his bungalow. It felt different now, alive with memories of Sophie's laughter and Lena's quiet resilience. He hung Sophie's drawing on the fridge, a reminder of what mattered. Word of his kindness spread, and soon neighbors were dropping by with casseroles or offering to help others in need. The diner started a program to donate meals to shelters, and Marcus found himself at the center of a small but growing ripple of compassion. He wasn't a hero, he told himself, but maybe he didn't need to be. Maybe being human was enough. Years later, Marcus stood at Sophie's high school graduation, Lena beaming beside him. Sophie, now a bright, confident young woman, hugged him tightly, whispering, "Thank you for giving us a home." Marcus's eyes stung, but he smiled. He'd given a key, yes, but what he'd gained was so much more. A family, a purpose, a belief that one small act could change everything. As he watched Sophie walk across the stage, diploma in hand, Marcus felt a warmth that no winter wind could touch. The world was still harsh, still cold, but he knew now that kindness could light even the darkest corners, and that was enough to keep him going, one step, one key, one heart at a time.